And we're live. Welcome everybody to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, September the 1st. We'll be following along the agenda that was posted in issue number 444 in the NPM RFC's repo. I've spammed the meeting notes doc for folks if they want to add themselves to the attendees list. And I'll be trying to take notes as usual in that doc. There's also a reference there to last week's meeting notes. And yeah, just want to quickly acknowledge, as I usually do, that these calls and all comms on the RFC's repo are covered under a code of conduct, and we just ask folks to please be kind and thoughtful to each other as we discuss the RFC's in flight. And please raise your hand if somebody is speaking so that I can call on you, and ideally we'll have good discussion. Quickly, we want to give time for folks that may have any announcements or want to share anything now. So does anybody have anything they want to share? If not, we can jump right into the agenda. The first item that was up here was the most recent issue that we actually created. I know, Nilf, you helped get this together. This is our RFC issue number 445. This essentially relates to the breaking changes we're planning for NPM 8. Nilf, did you want to maybe speak a little bit to this?
Sure. So the idea here is we'd like the next Semver major to not so much contain a lot of breaking changes, so much as it does just kind of setting us up for success for the future. So the few things that we're definitely planning to do is drop support for all nodes older than 12.0. As in the engines field in the package.json will read that it requires node greater than or equal to 12. The idea there is we've got a lot of node 10 workarounds in a lot of different places, and it would be nice to get all those chopped out. And it also brings us up a little bit into the standards that we can follow as far as JavaScript itself goes. Another big part of what we want to do with this is with the release of NPM 7, we created quite a few issues where people who were using like Node 8, for example, managed to install NPM 7 because we let them. And then they had no easy means of restoring an NPM that actually works for them. So one of the big things that we'd like to get accomplished with NPM 8 is fixing that problem and making it so that NPM will flat out refuse to install a version of itself that is not compatible with the current node that the user is using. Doing that will just kind of help us make sure that we're not breaking things that we don't need to break, for one, and it also gives us a way to encourage people to update their node and their NPM by saying, no, you can't update your NPM until you update your node. Go here to find out how. So that's, as far as breaking changes, that's, I think, all we have planned. Sorry, go ahead, Darcy.
I was just going to say, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yep. So it should be a relatively painless migration for anybody who's already using NPM 7. And it will set us up a little bit later to do NPM 9 with some actual breaking change features and not just this.
Yeah, I saw Jordan had commented on this a couple hours ago as well. I'm not sure if you saw that.
Yeah, I just saw that, and I also just saw Gars. So the stricter peer depths change becoming default. That's one that we could consider, but yeah, I don't know if we'll do that. We want to try to keep it as easy a migration as possible. So it's a possibility that'll not happen in the next release. The dropping the programmatic API is another one that we should very much consider. We expose a programmatic API, but right now it's all callbacks and It's not very good, not very consistent. So we're kind of thinking NPM 8 will just remove that API entirely for now. And that will allow us time to design something with intent before the next Semver major. Couple of hands up. Isaac?
Yeah, so one thing I think might be Gar's comment as well. The refuse to install broken NPM should really be an NPM 7 change. That's not a breaking change. And that will actually set us up then. If anybody installs 8, we know they have a working node.
Yes.
The other thing, as far as stricter peer depths, you're right, that is a whole other proposal and conversation. I'm assuming that that's setting the strict peer depths flag on by default. That's going to be a really, really tough one. I think, even anytime soon, it's still very much the case that, if you look at a lot of projects out there in the wild, they've all got, peer depths that end up with an invalid kind of overridden edge because it's a mess out there. And things are mostly working, so it's probably fine how it is. I think that's probably going to stay opt-in for the foreseeable future, just until it will break less than a huge majority of projects using peer depths today.
All right. Did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I've been kind of having pre-talks with like Miles and some other Node.js folks. The less that breaks here, the more likely we can get this into the current node 16 too. If all we're doing is dropping a node that's not 16 and just breaking the programmatic API, and that's going to be our soft point with them. It's much more likely to come in. If we change the peer depths flag, there's no way it lands in 16.
Yeah, that's a good thing to note. Is the reason why we're limiting these changes is for the best possible outcome, which is we can land and NPM 8 in node 16, right? So yeah, that's a very good thing to caveat, and the reason why we have sort of a very small scope here. Any other comments folks want to share about this plan? I think it's good to note, as Isaac said, and I took the note that yes, the change to refuse to install an NPM version that has a mismatch, engines mismatch, or is unsupported by the current version of Node that you're trying to install under is NPM 7 change that we'll make before we cut the Node or NPM 8 version. Okay, if there's no other comments there, we'll keep this issue open, probably right up until we cut the NPM 8 release, just to consolidate any communications. We can continue to reference it until we actually make that change. And yeah, appreciate Nilf you championing and opening up that issue. Moving on to PR number 441. This is the addendum to the overrides spec, which I think came out of some internal pairing sessions that I know Isaac and I think Nilf have been doing to actually implement overrides. So Isaac, did you want to speak to maybe just the change and whether or not there's anything we need to consider based on Jordan's comments last week?
Yeah, so essentially what this does is it says if when considering sort of an override rule and trying to decide whether it applies to a given node in the tree, we of course look at the key in that overrides object. However, if the value either is a string or it's an object with a dot member, and that value, that kind of self value, also matches the current node, then we will also consider that a matching override rule. The reason for this is we need to be able to have a given override rule apply to a node in the tree, and then later be able to see, like, be able to tell, is this a thing that we would have overridden or that is in this state because it was overridden, and so on. Otherwise, we can very easily get into a state where if we only look at the key, right, we can build out the entire ideal tree, and then we put that, we reify that tree to disk. And then later we want to look at that tree and say, oh, is this what I should have? Well, because the override rule is applied based on what it resolved to, we have no way of knowing that that's why it was sort of re-resolved in this other state, unless we start doing kind of additional bookkeeping somewhere else, which is pretty brittle, right? Because node modules folders get deleted, people blow away their package locks, like it's totally common. And what we don't want to do is have npm ls start raising a warning because you have an invalid dependency when actually it is valid. It's an override. You've said you want this one instead. So yeah, the change is basically an override rule will apply if the key matches or if the self value matches a given node.
I think that's a good synopsis. Is there, like, I haven't seen other than Jordan's ask about any kind of like caveats beyond sort of like the main purpose of this is, sounds like we need a way to be able to track overridden nodes. This fixes that.
It does have some implications for the actual results in a number of cases, and I was very glad that we added a ton of examples, even though it made this RFC, even though it made this PR more significantly more work. You can see in the changes like exactly what got changed in all of those examples. So there's a couple of cases where we end up with things either being applied or never being applied because an earlier override rule affected it.
So the action item here, like, I think we can just close this out. Do you want to take the?
I will land it if nobody else has any other objections or complaints about it.
Don't think
it's
there's
very
any.
much in the weeds, so I'm not surprised that it didn't get a ton of bike shedding.
Okay. I'm gonna give you the action there. Do we want to keep it open for another week or just close it out? Because this is essentially a blocker. You're already going forward with probably like the implementation, right?
Yeah, we haven't made too much progress on implementation, but it's basically like if we can't do this, then we got to figure out something that's going to be a lot worse. So
okay, so just pull it in then.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. Moving on to the draft RFC, the robust lifecycle scripts, PR 437. This is from Fritzy. Is there any update here that you want to share?
No, there hasn't been any changes since we discussed this last week. Brief summary is that for lifecycle scripts as they are now, well, in previous version of NPM, NPM 6, we had an uninstall pre and post script. Doesn't make sense with the way things are deleted right now because there's just not enough context to know what's actually why a package directory was deleted or uninstalled. So this proposal aims to explore solutions in providing more context to scripts. Now, maybe I shouldn't have made an RFC before I had a fully fleshed out idea of what this should look like, but I wanted to start a conversation with the community on how we could have more robust lifecycle scripts, because people really do rely on these scripts for their packages.
Yeah, I think it's good to do it this way, like draft the RFC. Just that makes it notable that it's not like a fully fleshed out idea, and then ask for help and support from community and feedback on the initial idea. So I don't think that's a bad idea at all, Fritz. So yeah, we can develop it over time and hopefully get to somewhere that's more concrete in the months to come. It's not something that we're going to be able to queue up right away, but yeah, it's important for sure, like a clear context between, you know, the consumption and the consumer, and those events I think is important. And I think this is good to like have mapped this more and potentially have a way to delineate between those types of events, right? So it's cool. Awesome. So we'll move right along. Maybe we can take an action item. Do you want more visibility on this? Should we get like more people?
Let me get it out of work in progress by filling out, you know, all of the sections in at least a complete way. So, and then we can maybe promote and ask for input from the community.
Put the action. C sections. So moving right along to the next PR that we had open, number 436, new installation mode. This is the pure mode or strict mode we've been discussing quite a bit lately, proposed by Vincent Bailey. Vincent, did you want to give a quick update on sort of the changes and some of the communication and conversation that's happened in the RFC?
Yeah, so so at the end of the meeting last week, we had 2 action items. The first one was to figure, or that's how I'm reading that question, is how much of a breaking change would that be in the current release line? So like the question is like, should that be a major bump? That's kind of how I read that question. And I think since it's going to be an opt-in, it's not going to cause any need for major bump. And I think as far as we can see now, we will not need to introduce any breaking change to support that mode. That's our current thing, our current vision, but it's okay. If later we discover it needs a major, it's okay, I think. And then the second action item was to figure out what is the scope, like how much the ecosystem would break with the stricter installation of dependencies. So we get some more data here. So luckily, PNPM and Yarn plug and play have already been shipping a strict package manager for a while now, and they've been actively working on fixing the community. And they are like two kind of thing that will break with that symlink approach. The first one is packages that have omitted to declare some dependencies to their in their package JSONs. So this is like apparent from the feedback we got from the owner of Yarn. This is not an issue. There is no good reason for owners to omit these dependencies. It's only a mistake, and some don't want to fix them because they only care about PNPM. But if we implement symlink in PNPM, then everyone should care about fixing these issues. So this should this should be able to be fixed. It's still undecided whether we want to have a backdoor or a way to locally override or declare dependencies that you know are missing for an external package or third-party package. So I think this is still an open question. So that's the first kind of things that can break with Symlink, and the other thing is environments that don't support Symlink, as you know, they don't follow Symlinks. And we got from the PNPM owner an example that apparently the Amazon Web Services functions don't support Symlink, and we know that the Metro, which is the React Native bundlers, also doesn't support Symlink. Yeah, so that's, I think that's all we are aware of that are like incompatible with the use of Symlinks.
Can you say
there's
the
a-
last example? So you said Amazon Web Services and another that you were aware of. Sorry.
Yeah, React Native.
There's one more, I believe, Vincent, and that's packages that do static analysis of the node modules directory, like for logging, like ESLint loading plugins, right?
Okay. Yeah, okay. So so this is but this is something we can fix because they, okay, and the fix is in this package themselves. ESLint. Okay. So it seems,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, it seems that the you know, it won't be much since, you know, PNPM and Yarn already paved the way there in the ecosystem, and it seems also that the extra step that is needed that Yarn and PNPM didn't manage to do, they didn't manage to do it because they didn't have the the community using their package manager, which will not be an issue with NPM. So so that's that. So it doesn't. That's my personal opinion, but it doesn't feel scary. It would feel scary if we would propose this as a default, but since we propose it as an opt-in, and we plan to make it in a way that you can easily swap between mode. So you can, like in your development environment and your CI, you can use strict mode or pure mode to kind of validate that your repo is fine. But on new production, if you want to develop to an Amazon function, you may decide to install dependency there in the hosted mode, and things will still work because everything that will work in pure mode will also work in hosted mode because this is like strict. So so I think that's that makes the concern less scary. Yeah. Any comment about this?
No comments really. I just want to make sure I captured everything. And so yeah, it does seem like we've presented sort of like a few of the known problems with like projects that might want to use this new reification mode. But again, and I posted this in our chat, but this is essentially opt-in. So there's still options for these projects in terms of doing package management. They don't have to try to use this mode, and it might not be, it's not viable for them based on, you know, the existing like package managers going down this road. So it's I just wanted to essentially note that yeah, I feel like your comments are fairly accurate, and yeah, like the concerns with is this going to break me has already been that's sort of already been discovered by implementing this strategy and other package managers. Isaac, I see your hands up. Do you
Yeah,
wanna
so
comment?
I do. So the main thing or takeaway from just kind of a brief sync up before this meeting, I think is implementation wise, the way it's probably going to look is that we create the hoisted, as if it's about to be nested tree in memory. That's what actually gets written to the lock file. But then we have when you're in this unhoisted mode, we transmute that tree, and then that's what we actually put on disk. So there is potentially that caveat where the lock file and the node modules folder are no longer in sync with one another. However, we still have the hidden lock file, which will always represent exactly what's on disk, because that's its purpose. And that provides interoperability if you have, that allows us to keep all the same contracts that we have today in terms of when do we generate e-resolve errors and so on, as well as allowing interoperability with other people who are not using this mode on the same project for whatever reason. You'll have differently shaped node modules, but other than that, like you'll be getting the same depths and the same versions, same resolutions, everything. The other comment I wanted to say, I know Vincent kind of touched on this a little bit, but the conversation around like what should be shared if there's workspaces, if there's peer depths, et cetera, that's a separate conversation going on in RFC PR 335 or 375. And anything we decide there, we can implement with unhoisted mode actually more easily than with our current reification strategy. So I think it's a little bit of a red herring in this unhoisted RFC proposal.
Yeah, this there has been, I think, some inefficient discussions due to unclear vocabulary, and I may be only speaking for myself, but at least for me, the term sharing was not always clear. So yeah, that's
Naming
that's
things is
probably
hard.
why. Yeah, that's probably why. So I have a task on myself to try to because I kind of mix the motivation and the nice side effects in the RFC, so as to clearly separate and call out those two as what they are. So yeah. So
I think we got next steps and maybe even a start of kind of how to start looking at this or thinking about it.
Yeah, sorry, what were the action items from the call before? You said you're going to take on the action Vincent to split out. So could you just reiterate what is you're going to do next?
Let me see. Yeah, to rephrase the RFC to make it clearer, and hopefully that will spawn easier discussions.
Right, to specifically to rework the motivation section to be focused less on the side effects discussion and more on the motivation behind the unhoisted mode in workspaces itself. So
yeah.
And then the other action item that we came up when syncing earlier today was what Isaac said was to kind of redirect some of the discussion on what things should be shared to that other RFC.
Sorry, what's the number again, Isaac, of the shared versus not shared RFC? Do you have it open?
375.
Thank you.
Yeah, so and there is like a few more points in the comments of the RFC. So there is one about the naming. So it seems to be consensus that pure mode is not the name we want to go with. So we will. We haven't decided yet, but we will not go with the pure mode. We'll come up with something more. You know, in computer science, there's two hard things. There's cache invalidation and naming. So we will we'll work on that one on naming.
I thought that was it was two. Was it two hard problems? Or or four hard problems, and the third problem is off by one errors, I think is the one. Or yeah.
Oh yeah, that's part of the joke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So is there a separate issue you want to create about that, or you want to just come up with a few different options for the name of the mode inside that thread, or like how best do you think it will be to propose like new names for the RFC itself?
I think I can come up with a list of candidates next week to this meeting, and then we can discuss it. Yeah, or poll. Yeah, that too. So we don't exclude people that cannot join the call. Yeah.
Async poll has worked in the past when we were trying to come up with names and just see where people felt best. So it might be even a good idea to create a separate issue and just for that itself. I think we even have a poll generator, I think, as like a slash command within our issues, but I can sync up with you separately to get that going.
Yeah.
Could you also do reactions to a comment on the issue?
That's also
so
possible.
You could have like, there's like 8 emojis that each emoji is 1 to 8 options. I see that sometimes, so just throwing it out there.
Yeah. So we'll work on this. So it's ready for next week. And then there's another question is whether, because like this RFC, like the motivation is about, you know, not oversharing dependencies between workspaces. And so this is like in the motivation, this comes from workspaces. And there was this question whether the implementation should be limited to workspaces or whether any project using NPM should be able to obtain that mode. And the answer is that any project should be able. First, because the implementation is actually pretty generic. It's not specific to workspace, and so we can get the same perf benefit as with workspace. But another point that may be even more relevant is that as a package owner, that I'm just publish a small package, for me to have the guarantee that my package will work in some people that use strict workspaces, I need to have my own repo be installed in strict mode. So it's kind of, I have the guarantee that I'm compatible with strict mode because I'm building and testing my own code in strict mode, even though I don't have workspaces. So I think that's also a good motivation to enable that that strategy in projects that don't use workspaces.
So just to capture that last note properly, there was a question, it seemed like, that whether or not this RFC should be or will apply to all projects and not just workspace projects. And what you've said is, yes, this work and this RFC should encapsulate all projects that want to take advantage of this strict mode. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any work that we need to do to the RFC to make sure that that's clear?
Possibly. I'll reread from it. I know, Tierney, you said you were disappointed that this will not be supported by projects, so you maybe have misread, and if this is the case, then is the proof that we need to rephrase.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely my perception reading it was that it wouldn't be supported in non-workspaces environments. And that's something I would like to see, although I know that would definitely require additional work, and that work can be done separately. I think that's potentially fine. Like if there's a global cache, even that becomes an interesting thing that is probably separate from the implementation for workspaces. But
Yeah, so
I
I
think-
don't think.
so good.
Yeah, so you misread. We from the beginning we wanted to support this for all projects, and I don't think there is extra overhead in implementation to support it everywhere. And, like maybe, you know, the npm CLI team can confirm this, who are more familiar with the code, but I don't see it as a big concern. Yeah.
Any other comments then on this? Okay.
No, like there
Um,
was only one more comments from Jordan, and I think these comments like are created by this confusion in the vocabulary. So I think we will like wait for the rewrite or the clarification, and then follow up on this after that.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Cool. So there's a couple to-dos, I guess, on your plate then, Vincent,
Yep.
that I've added here. Appreciate you updating us, and yeah, we'll obviously work with you to try to get this in good shape for next week as well. Moving on then to RC 422, NPM audit assertions. I'm not sure, Tierney, if we were able to if you're able to essentially give an update of maybe some of the conversation that's happened.
Yeah, the conversation at this, I believe I've completed the to-dos. I mean, there wasn't a lot from what I recall. Sorry, I have a little bit of a list because my tongue. Yeah, but I believe I've completed the to-dos that we kind of left with. There seems to be conversation around having a way to trust third parties, and like have third parties tell you who you can trust, or like, you know, say I don't trust Dan in React, and like I don't trust the React team, so I'm gonna ignore their assertions and still get them. I don't necessarily agree that that's the best path forward, because it gets to the point of being viral where like I just don't trust anyone, and then this does, or like new people are just like randomly thinking, oh, if I don't trust people, that's more secure, and then the problem persists. Like I don't think that's a particularly excellent path to solving this problem. Further, I think figuring out a mechanism for sources of trust is annoying and very hard, and I don't necessarily think it's something we should try to do. Like the best solution I can come up with, or the thing that I would think would be the best solution, would be to have a module be your published sources of trust, and like depend on that somehow. But it's annoying. Like it's a lot of work, and I don't necessarily think the value derived from it is deserving like of that amount of effort. So yeah, I think that is definitely you know, there's been some discussion about that. Yeah, so that's where it's at. I could be wrong. I'm happy to back off on that point and build that in. But I am unconvinced that that is a good tool or a good thing to support. But happy if, you know, others disagree with that. I'm more than happy to back up on that.
Sure, I'll just again give the reference here to the rendered doc, since some folks probably haven't read it in a while, and I think you have made some edits. Yeah, I agree. I basically in chat noted like some folks are never going to be happy or pleased with like the trust model. I'm like, if you trust the authority to provide you audit alerts, then you should trust that same authority to provide you with like metadata about those alerts, or like essentially create like the mechanism for claims that this is no longer relevant to me. It's like not trusting the ecosystem at large. So like that, I feel like we can never build any tooling if you don't, it's just about providing as much information, I think, as possible to end users to then slice and dice the view that they see, however they want, and to utilize that metadata then to make that like actionable in a way that is specific to your projects, right? Like, it's not that we're trying to enforce what you consider to be relevant, I guess, but it's trying to introduce, I think, brand new information into the ecosystem that will make audits more useful and helpful in the future. So
yeah, and I think there's also something to be said for like, someone can go build this tooling, and if it's compelling and if it gains usage, I think that's entirely reasonable to RFC it in, because it's not like I'm like with the unfiltered property. You can just get all that data and then like have an additional tool that you pipe that out to and process it however you want with your trust. I think that's, if people are able to build a compelling experience with that, I think that's fine. I think that's something to RFC, but I think initially I think the kind of all or nothing approach is a bit better, because I mean, there's a lot of problems with deciding who to trust. Like, who are the people making that decision? Who are they informed on who's like actually trustworthy? That like, I don't even know necessarily. And like, I spend all of my time in this space. And like, I can make very educated guesses, but like, I don't know if like, Gmod fan 273, who maintains a module that has 13 million downloads, is like trustworthy or not. And so getting that data and processing it and is, I think, like, if you're at the level where you care about that filtering, is important. And like you're yeah, I don't know. I think it gets real rough, and it's not a model that we thought we can adequately build out.
Yeah, like if you trust the top level depths to then have maintained depths, and then they like trust it, like it starts with whoever you're including into your project, right?
So web of trust.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything to consider in terms of the actual design of what you've proposed? Just looking at it, like some of the patterns are a little bit, I guess, unique to this one command.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed is like just the module flag. I don't want to bike shed too much on that, but like it's definitely a pattern I think I've only seen us use maybe with npx or npm exec. I think takes a package flag. I'm not sure if there was any particular reason we couldn't.
No reason. Literally, that was just the word that was in my brain. I'm happy to change that.
So potentially
like
a cert could take like a package specifier, package identifier. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to change that. If there's any design decisions in this that are weird, it's just because it's how my brain thought about it. Happy to make those changes as we go.
And I can't say this because it's a long running thread, but if you've been following the conversation there, did Mike from GitHub?
Yes, asking Mike. Yep, he
jumped in.
He's jumped in a few times. I think the latest one was on the trust stuff. I asked him kind of, he proposed a straw person example of how to potentially set up trust, and I kind of asked how he would use what identity model he'd use, and he kind of backtracked on what part of the example he used and said, domains are potentially a bad option for ownership, and then suggested something that basically either having a similar function to the GPG keys that npm or the GitHub publishes. So if you go to github.com/user.gpg, you'll see the public GPG keys for that user that GitHub has, or a trust flag with like the org or the specific org/repo. I can see that. I get concerned about. I think having the npmjs.com/user.gpg, I'm fine with that. I don't know necessarily what the DX would be on that. And then the trust org or org/repo, I would prefer it to be a scope or like a user on npm rather than tying it directly to GitHub. But yeah, that's the only thing there. Like I think if we want to go down that trust model, which it doesn't sound like we do, or at least I'm unconvinced of it at this point. That I think that the trust and then like a username on npm would be the most ideal path for me.
In terms of any next steps or action items, is there anything clear from your side, or
No,
is this something?
I mean, making those changes that you just asked for, but other than that, I don't think there's anything clear for me.
Okay. This is something that can go ahead of the actual API existing as well. We've had that conversation in the past where we don't necessarily need the service to actually support this, especially if you're configured to a registry that might support this, and like especially if you're getting like your audit alerts and advisory DB is being hosted somewhere else, then potentially this is something that somebody could implement other than the public registry. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So just to be mindful that like we could say that we want to do this and add this to the CLI, but it may not actually work until there's a service for it to to actually pull out that information or send the information. Cool. Okay, if nobody else has any feedback there, we can move on to the last item that was on here. This is PR 126. This is adding types information to package JSON in the registry. I think the reason why this had bubbled up before was Gar, I think you were going to land a change in, I think it was npm pack list. Is that accurate?
Repackage JSON. And yeah, we iterated it on it since the last meeting. Basically, the changes between then and now are that there's no reason to even evaluate flow. That wasn't part of the original request. It was just like, hey, we should do this, so we're supporting more than one thing. But no one has asked for it, and that to me doesn't meet the requirement of us putting it in. It's way easy. If someone says, hey, you should do this to flow also, it's like 4 lines now. So we dropped flow, and I think that was the only tweak. So basically the PR, which I can pull up, Rest 103. There's chat. Repackage JSON pull request number 103. So I clarified that they want it on types and not typings. Typings is the old way of doing it. And that we're adding it and not flow. And then I pinged the original author of the RFC, and it's like, this would solve what they need. So if this lands, anyone publishing in this, whatever version of the CLI has this update, the types attribute would be in the registry if they have types auto detected. I think it's good to go. And I would love to get approval on this or general consensus, ship it, and close this RFC.
So this is something that could land potentially even tomorrow if we land,
Yes.
approve it today. Okay.
Yep.
Orda, I see already +1 to it.
He said, I confirmed all the questions I had. And he's like, yes, this will solve our problem.
Let's try to land this week then. Let's try to prioritize this and today and try to get pulled in for tomorrow.
Okay.
Unless there's any pushback from folks. Cool.
And for future people watching the recording, I mean, if the community says, hey, Flow's still something a lot of people use, and this was we will use this or want to use this, we can add it. But like, this wasn't even something that team was even asking for, said they would use. So like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to add it.
Apologize, just taking notes. So let's take the action item. Gar, can I put you on that because we'll have to pull it in and then cut a new version of repackaged JSON, which I think means a little bit of churn in our depths. Is that okay?
It's a feat, so I just need to cut it and update the CLI. And Luke and I will do that. We have a pairing session in about an hour.
Awesome. Okay. To pull our
Then you'll be able to type npm view a package and the word types and see if it's got a types description for anything that's used in new version of npm to publish, which is awesome.
We got a couple minutes left. Did anybody else have anything they want to bring up or speak to? If not, then I will give everybody 3 minutes back today and talk to you in sync in the RFCs repo. Cheers.